What if just one small habit, repeated every day, could completely change your life? We often dream of big success, but it's the little things, those quiet daily choices that shape our future. Atomic Habits teaches us that change doesn't start with giant leaps, but with tiny, powerful steps. Picture this: a young man feels stuck in life. Every day looks the same: wake up late, scroll on his phone, rush through the day, and sleep with regret. He wants to change, but every time he tries, the mountain feels too big to climb. Then he discovers the secret: habits. He learns that if a plane shifts its direction by just 3 degrees, it ends up in a completely different city. The same is true for life. Small changes can create massive transformations. So he starts small: one push-up a day, reading the pages before bed, writing one line in his journal. At first, nothing changes, but slowly, he feels stronger, wiser, and more focused. Weeks turn into months, and those tiny steps become a new lifestyle. He realizes success isn't built in one day. It's built every day, through small, invisible victories that no one else sees. And suddenly, the man who once felt lost now walks with confidence because his habits built his destiny. The city lights flickered softly outside, casting muted reflections on Michael's bedroom walls. He sat at the edge of his bed, hunched slightly, staring down at the cracked wooden floor as if the tiny fissures held some secret about his life. Around him lay a jumble of unfinished books, dust-coated sneakers, and notebooks filled with half-written plans. His room was a museum of unfulfilled dreams. Each item silently reminded him of the life he hadn't yet achieved, the potential he feared he might never reach. At 27, Michael felt the weight of indecision pressing down on him. Each morning, he scrolled through social media, watching highlight reels of people who seemed to have it all: entrepreneurs launching businesses, athletes winning championships, influencers grinning against sunsets. Every swipe deepened a subtle ache of inadequacy. One sleepless night, his gaze fell upon a quote on his screen: "Success is not built in one day, it's built every day." Those words penetrated his mind, refusing to let go. Something inside him stirred. What if I just start with one small thing tomorrow? Just one. He whispered to himself. The next day, nothing miraculous happened. No sudden energy surged through him. Yet, standing by the bathroom sink, he dropped to the floor and completed a single push-up. Just one. It felt almost laughable, but deep inside, a spark flickered, a small glimmer of hope breaking through the shadows. He did another, then another. By the end of the week, he could manage 10 push-ups in a row. Physically, little had changed, but mentally, something profound had begun. He felt the subtle warmth of progress, the invisible power of consistency. Michael began applying the same principle to other areas of his life, to pages of reading at night, 1 minute of meditation in the morning, a single line in his journal each day. These tiny acts felt trivial at first, almost meaningless, yet gradually, they formed the invisible scaffolding of his new life. Memories of childhood flashed through his mind: school playgrounds, races he never won, games where he finished second or third. The cheers of others had always echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of his failures. Back then, he lacked the discipline to follow through. But now, every small habit was a deliberate brick in the foundation of his future. Weeks turned into months. His room no longer felt like a battlefield. Sneakers found their places in neat corners. Journals were filled with check marks and completed plans. Michael realized small habits don't just produce small results, they create the foundation for greatness. Friends noticed the change. James, who used to tease him for quitting early, now invited him on morning runs. His sister commented on the new confidence in his voice. Even at work, his boss observed his punctuality and focus, hinting at possible promotion. Michael thought of bamboo trees, years of growth hidden beneath the soil. And then one day, a sudden, towering emergence. His habits were his roots, silently growing, preparing him for his own rise. During a morning run, the sun began to rise over the city skyline, golden light reflecting off the glass towers. Michael felt that each ray of sunlight mirrored his own, emerging optimism. These small, consistent habits were constructing the skyscrapers of his future. Standing before the mirror later, he flexed not his muscles, but his discipline. His reflection didn't show the final destination yet, but it radiated belief. Small habits lead to big results. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Big results are just small habits repeated long." enough to become destiny. The ink seeped into the page like roots into fertile soil. Michael understood this was just the beginning. Each habit, no matter how tiny, created ripples through his health, relationships, and career. There were no shortcuts, no instant miracles, just a simple, undeniable truth. Small habits, compounded over time, create extraordinary life. And as he closed his journal, a calm, empowering clarity settled over him. His life had begun its cinematic transformation. Morning light poured into Michael's room, washing the walls with a soft, golden hue. He rolled out his yoga mat, every fiber of his being tense with anticipation and self-doubt alike. Yet, beneath it all, there was a flicker of determination that had not existed before. Today, he would continue the small rituals that he hoped would one day become his new identity. He began with a deep, measured breath, letting the air fill his lungs completely, grounding himself. Then, he lowered his body into a push-up. Just like yesterday, the motion was simple, almost trivial, but this time, it was different. Each movement carried the weight of intention. This was no longer about building muscles. It was about reclaiming control over his own life. After 10 repetitions, he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes for meditation, a single minute of focused breathing. Yet it felt like an eternity of peace washing over the chaos inside him. For the first time in years, Michael realized that discipline wasn't punishment, it was liberation. He opened his journal, pen hovering above the page, and wrote a single line. Today, I choose progress over comfort. It was small, almost laughably simple, yet as he wrote it, he felt the invisible threads of habit strengthening within him. Every mark on the page was a tiny victory, an affirmation that change was possible. During his morning run through the quiet streets, he noticed things he had ignored for years: the sound of leaves rustling, birds greeting the sunrise, the distant hum of the city waking up. Each step, each breath, each heartbeat was a reminder that life itself moved in rhythms, and his habits were beginning to sync with it. Flashbacks came unbidden, school days filled with procrastination, half-finished projects, and a lingering fear of failure. He remembered the frustration, the helplessness, the desire to be better yet lacking the tools to do so. Now, the tools were simple: daily actions, push-ups, journaling, reading, meditation. Small acts, yes, but they were building a scaffold strong enough to hold his dreams. At work, Michael began applying this discipline. He arrived early, tackled the smallest tasks first, and focused on deep work without distraction. Colleagues began to notice subtle changes: his calm confidence, his unshakable focus. Even his boss commented, "You're showing real consistency, keep it up." Michael smiled quietly to himself, knowing that the foundation he was laying now would support opportunities he couldn't yet see. That evening, as he reflected on the day, Michael understood a vital truth. Discipline wasn't about dramatic, life-altering events. It was about the quiet accumulation of small, meaningful choices made consistently. Each push-up, each journal entry, each minute of meditation was a brick in the structure of his future. He sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled in. The contrast between the rising and falling light mirrored his own journey, the shadows of his past now softened by the glow of his deliberate actions. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of control and purpose. His life was no longer left to chance. He was actively building it, one habit at a time. Michael closed his journal, pen resting softly on the last line. Consistency transforms ordinary days into extraordinary lives. And for the first time, he truly believed it. Each small habit, repeated with patience and intention, was not insignificant. It was the spark that would ignite the fire of his destiny. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew and the distant hum of a city beginning to stir. Michael laced up his running shoes and stepped onto the pavement, feeling the familiar rhythm of his breath sensing with the cadence of his footsteps. Each stride was no longer just physical movement. It was a symbol of commitment, of momentum slowly building from the small, deliberate actions he had begun weeks ago. As he ran past the quiet streets, memories of earlier failures flashed in his mind: unfinished projects, missed deadlines, and the haunting voice of self-doubt whispering, "You'll never make it." But today, something had changed. The voice was still there, faint, but it no longer had the power to paralyze him. Michael's small victories, 10 push-ups, to pages of reading, a minute of meditation, and a single line of journaling had created a momentum that carried him forward. unshakable and steady. Back at his apartment, he set out his notebook and began writing. This time, he didn't merely record what he had done. He mapped out the chain reaction each habit was creating. Every small act had compounded into confidence, clarity, and energy. Every completed task was a brick supporting a bridge to the future he had once thought impossible. He realized that momentum wasn't just motion, it was the invisible force that transformed intention into action, dreams into reality. At work, Michael noticed subtle shifts in how he interacted with colleagues. He listened more, focused more, and contributed ideas with quiet assurance. People began to respond differently. His presence now carried weight, not because he sought recognition, but because consistency had honed his competence and reliability. One colleague remarked, "You've changed. You're just different." Michael smiled inwardly, knowing the change had come not from luck or talent, but from tiny, repeated actions. Evenings became a sacred time of reflection. He would revisit the day's habits, tracking each one carefully. Missing a small habit now felt heavier than before, not because he was afraid of failure, but because he recognized the delicate balance of building momentum. Each habit fed the next, like gears turning a machine that no longer needed external pushes. It had begun to operate on its own internal energy. The city skyline glimmered as dusk settled. Michael stood at his window, watching cars move like veins of life through the streets below. He thought about the bamboo analogy, years of unseen growth underground, and then suddenly, a towering plant emerges. His momentum was invisible yet undeniable, like roots deep beneath the surface, preparing him for a leap that only time could reveal. That night, he journaled a simple line: "Momentum is built from tiny victories. Keep going, every step counts." And as he closed the notebook, he felt a surge of quiet confidence. He had started small, with actions that seemed insignificant, yet together they had woven a tapestry of progress, resilience, and hope. Michael understood now that life did not demand grand gestures to change its course. It demanded consistency, patience, and the courage to start small. Momentum was not a reward, it was the natural byproduct of small habits performed daily, and with it, he knew anything was possible. The mid-morning sunlight spilled through Michael's apartment window, casting long shadows across the floor strewn with notebooks and journals. His routine had begun to solidify: push-ups, journaling, meditation. But today, an unexpected challenge tested his newfound discipline. An urgent work assignment landed on his desk, demanding immediate attention and threatening to derail his carefully constructed morning habits. Michael paused, feeling the familiar pang of stress and the creeping voice of doubt whispering, "You'll have to skip everything else today." The temptation to abandon the small routines was strong, yet something inside him, a quiet determination he hadn't known existed, urged him to hold the line. He took a deep breath, reminding himself consistency matters more than perfection. He decided to tackle the work first, completing it with focus and efficiency, and then returned to his rituals. 10 push-ups to pages of reading, 1 minute of meditation, 1 line in his journal. Each small action felt heavier than before, but heavier in a meaningful way, like resistance training for the mind. The day unfolded with minor setbacks: a missed call, a delayed email response, a brief moment of fatigue during his run. Each obstacle could have become an excuse, a reason to abandon his habits. But Michael faced them consciously, reframing each challenge as an opportunity to strengthen his resolve. He reminded himself that small habits were not just routines, they were the scaffolding that held him steady in the storm. During a reflective pause on his evening run, Michael noticed the city in motion around him: cars, pedestrians, streetlights, all moving in patterns that were constant yet flexible. He realized that life, much like the city, would present obstacles continuously. His habits, however, had become his adaptive framework, allowing him to navigate uncertainty with resilience and poise. Flashbacks to previous failures surfaced: missed deadlines, lost opportunities, the shame of letting others down. But this time, the memories served as fuel rather than chains. Each small habit he performed now was a deliberate act of defiance against the inertia of his past. Every push-up, every journal entry, every quiet minute of meditation was a statement. He was capable, consistent, and determined. That night, sitting by the window with a journal in hand, he reflected on the day's victories and challenges. Obstacles are inevitable, but my habits are my anchor. I will not be swayed. He wrote the words slowly, letting each letter sink in. A sense of empowerment and clarity filled him. He knew that by facing and overcoming even small obstacles daily, he was cultivating a mindset capable of conquering much larger challenges in the future. As the city lights flickered on, Michael felt a quiet pride. He had discovered a profound truth. Small habits are not just steps toward success. They are the tools to overcome life's inevitable hurdles, and with each small, consistent action, he was not just surviving the day, he was actively shaping the resilient, focused, and empowered person he aspired to become. The soft glow of morning light filtered through Michael's apartment blinds, painting stripes of gold across the wooden floor. The rhythm of his morning routine had begun to settle in, and yet, today, he noticed something different, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the way his actions were influencing not just his life, but the lives of those around him. As he sat at the breakfast table, writing a single line in his journal, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Each completed habit was no longer just an isolated act, it was part of a growing chain reaction. The pages of reading yesterday had sparked an idea at work, one that earned a nod of appreciation from his manager. The brief meditation had given him the clarity to respond calmly to a colleague's frustration, turning tension into collaboration. These small habits, performed consistently, were sending ripples through his life, touching corners he hadn't expected. During his morning run through the city streets, Michael observed his neighbors, joggers, and passersby. He realized that the energy he carried now was different: subtle confidence, quiet discipline, and a sense of purpose radiating outward. People responded differently, smiling more, offering nods of acknowledgement, engaging with him in a way that was new, unexpected, yet deeply satisfying. His habits were no longer contained within the walls of his room. They were spilling into the world, influencing his environment in gentle, profound ways. At work, he noticed a shift to his focus, inspired others. Team members began adopting small productive routines he had casually shared in conversation. Short planning sessions, mini meditation breaks, mindful reflections on their tasks. Michael felt a sense of pride, not from recognition, but from the awareness that his own small, consistent actions were creating positive change around him. His life, once confined to passive observation, was now an active agent of influence. That evening, Michael sat on a bench in the park, watching children play, couples walking hand in hand, and the city lights starting to twinkle as dusk fell. He reflected on the metaphor of a pebble dropped into a pond, one small act sending concentric circles outward, touching distant shores. Each habit he cultivated was a pebble, each action a deliberate act creating waves that extended far beyond his immediate view. Flashbacks to past failures rose again, but now with a different lens. He remembered times he had doubted his ability to make a difference, times he had been paralyzed by indecision. Now, he understood that impact did not always come from monumental achievements. It often began with consistent choices that gradually influenced the world in ways unseen at first. As he wrote in his journal that night, Michael captured the revelation. My small habits are not just shaping me, they are shaping the world around me. Quietly, persistently, and powerfully, he closed the notebook and leaned back, feeling a surge of fulfillment. The ripple effect was real, subtle yet unstoppable. Every push-up, every page read, every mindful breath was no longer just a personal victory. It was a testament to the compounding power of consistency, discipline, and intentional action. Michael understood now that the life he was building was bigger than himself. It was a force that touched others, creating momentum that could not be contained. He walked home slowly, the city alive with movement around him, each person unknowingly part of a larger pattern influenced by countless small habits like his own. And in that moment, he realized small habits, when repeated with intention, have the power to transform not only a life, but the world it touches. The gentle hum of early morning traffic seeped through Michael's window as he stretched his arms toward the ceiling, feeling the familiar tension of muscles waking after a night's rest. Over the past few weeks, his small habits had begun to anchor him, giving structure to his days. Yet, he knew that the real power of transformation didn't lie in occasional bursts of effort. It lay in consistent repetition, day after day. Sitting at his desk with a fresh notebook and pen, he reflected on his progress. Each habit: 10 push-ups, the pages of reading, a minute of meditation. A line in the journal had started as tiny, almost negligible acts. Yet, through consistency, they had compounded into a force that reshaped his energy, focus, and self-belief. Michael realized that the hardest part was not starting. It was showing up, day after day, even when the initial excitement faded. He recalled mornings when he had woken up tired, tempted to skip his routines, or evenings when work drained his motivation. In those moments, the choice to perform even the smallest habit had reinforced his self-discipline, gradually wiring his mind to expect and embrace consistent action. Each completed habit became a thread in the fabric of his new identity, one of resilience, focus, and quiet determination. During his morning run through the park, Michael noticed the rhythm of his steps syncing seamlessly with his breath. The world seemed to move in patterns, just like his habits. He understood now that consistency wasn't a rigid chain. It was a flow, a gentle but unstoppable current that shaped not only his actions, but also his thoughts, decisions, and interactions. At work, the results of his reinforced consistency became tangible. Projects were completed with efficiency. Meetings flowed smoothly, and colleagues began to rely on his steady presence. The ripple effects of his daily habits extended outward, enhancing not only his own performance, but also inspiring those around him to adopt their own small, purposeful routines. Back home, Michael prepared a simple breakfast and paused to reflect. On his day, he revisited his journal entries, noticing patterns emerging, habits that consistently produce clarity, focus, and small wins. By reinforcing these actions daily, he was creating a foundation strong enough to support larger, more ambitious goals. He wrote in his journal, "Consistency transforms small actions into unstoppable momentum. Show up every day, no matter how small the step." The words felt alive, resonating with an inner truth he had discovered through personal experience. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden streaks across the city skyline, Michael felt a quiet sense of empowerment. Each habit repeated consistently was no longer just a task, it was a declaration of intent, a tangible affirmation that he controlled the direction of his life. His transformation was no longer hypothetical, it was visible in his energy, focus, and the calm confidence that radiated in his interactions. Michael understood that small habits, performed consistently, were the secret engine of progress. They were invisible yet powerful, subtle yet unyielding. And as he closed his journal and looked out at the twinkling lights of the city, he knew that this reinforcement of consistency was the backbone of the extraordinary life he was building, one deliberate choice at a time. Michael sat at his desk, the morning sun casting sharp beams across his open journal. Today, he decided to do something different. He would measure his progress not in grand milestones, but in the subtle, quiet victories that often went unnoticed. The last few weeks of small habits had started to shape his life, but now he wanted to see the evidence, tangible proof that consistency was transforming him. He flipped back through the pages, reading entries that at first seemed insignificant. 10 push-ups on a morning he felt exhausted, a single page read when he thought he'd skip it, one line of journaling penned with a distracted mind. And yet, as he traced the lines, a story emerged, a story of incremental growth, of tiny efforts compounding into meaningful change. Each act, no matter how small, was a testament to his perseverance. Determined to quantify his progress, Michael created a simple chart, columns for habits completed, mood levels, and productivity. Days when he faltered were marked in red, days when he triumphed in green. Reviewing the weeks, he saw a pattern. The green squares were increasing, the red slowly fading. The data didn't just track habits, it revealed a truth he already felt deep in his bones. Small, consistent actions produce visible, measurable results over time. During his morning run, he reflected on this realization. Each step felt lighter, more purposeful. The city around him buzzed with life, but Michael's mind focused inward, tracking his own momentum. Just like the buildings that grew slowly over decades, layer by layer, his personal development was the sum of countless small, deliberate choices. The progress might have been invisible to outsiders, but he could see it, feel it, and let it drive him forward. At work, measuring his progress translated into greater efficiency. Tasks he used to postpone were now handled promptly. Ideas he once hesitated to voice now flowed confidently in meetings. He realized that acknowledging small wins created motivation for the next step. The habit of measurement itself had become a catalyst, reinforcing his consistency and sharpening his focus. That evening, Michael reflected on the ripple effects. Friends noticed subtle changes: his calm demeanor, his attentive listening, his focused energy. Even his sister commented on his transformation. "You seem different, more present." And he knew it wasn't just perception, it was a reflection of his growth. Tangible proof that small, consistent habits had a compounding effect far beyond the individual acts themselves. He wrote in his journal, "Progress is not always loud or obvious, but it is unstoppable when tracked and nurtured daily." Closing the notebook, he felt a deep sense of validation. The small actions he had once doubted were not meaningless. They were building a future more vibrant and empowered than he had dared to imagine. Standing at his window, watching the city, lights began to twinkle as dusk approached. Michael smiled. Each habit, each repeated action, each moment of conscious effort was a stepping stone. He had learned that measuring progress turned invisible momentum into visible proof of growth, reinforcing his belief that the extraordinary life he envisioned was already quietly unfolding, one small habit at a time. The golden morning light spilled gently across Michael's apartment, brushing over the scattered pages of his journals and the worn edges of his sneakers. Despite the progress he had made, a whisper of frustration lingered in his mind. He wanted results tangible, immediate, undeniable. Yet, as he prepared for his morning meditation, he reminded himself that transformation was not instantaneous. Real change required patience. Sitting cross-legged on his yoga mat, eyes closed, Michael focused on his breath. One inhale, one exhale, one deliberate moment at a time. He reflected on the bamboo tree metaphor, the years of unseen growth beneath the soil, the patience required before a sudden, towering emergence. The lesson resonated deeply. Growth cannot be rushed. It unfolds quietly, steadily, in its own time. During his morning run, Michael noticed the rhythm of the world around him. Trees grew slowly, but surely. Rivers carved valleys over decades. The sun rose and set each day without haste. Nature itself was patient, and he realized that his habits, repeated consistently, were aligning him with this natural flow. Each push-up, each journal entry, each minute of focused meditation was a silent investment in the future, a proof that patience and persistence were allies. At work, he faced moments of impatience. A project moved slower than expected. Recognition was delayed, and yet, rather than succumbing to frustration, Michael reframed the experience. He understood that the habits he nurtured daily were accumulating like invisible capital. The results would come not necessarily on his schedule, but in alignment with the natural compounding of his efforts. Evening came, and Michael walked through the quiet streets of his neighborhood. The air was cool, and the city hummed softly. With life, he thought of the long months ahead, the inevitable challenges, the unseen work that lay beneath the surface of visible progress. A sense of calm washed over him. Patience was not passive, it was active, disciplined, and deeply empowering. By continuing his habits with steadfast commitment, he was planting seeds that would eventually bloom beyond anything he could force or rush. Sitting by the window, journal in hand, Michael wrote, "Patience is the companion of consistency. The small actions I take today will compound into the life I envision tomorrow." The words felt heavy with truth and light with hope. He realized that waiting was not weakness. It was the disciplined cultivation of strength over time. As dusk settled over the city, the skyline glowing with fading sunlight, Michael reflected on his journey. Each small habit had become a thread in a larger tapestry of transformation. By embracing patience, he was learning to trust the process, to honor the invisible work being done within him. The future would reveal the fruits of his diligence. But for now, he found confidence in the knowledge that every day of consistent effort was shaping a stronger, wiser, and more resilient version of himself. Michael smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace. He understood now that small habits, nurtured with patience, were the foundation of lasting change, and that this journey, slow, steady, and deliberate, was where true mastery of life began. The first light of dawn seeped through Michael's window, reflecting off the polished floor and illuminating his journals, neatly stacked in the corner. He had begun to understand something profound. Progress wasn't about dramatic leaps or sudden transformations. It was about the compound effect, the accumulation of countless small habits, repeated consistently over time, quietly reshaping his life. Michael started his day with a single push-up, feeling the familiar burn in his muscles, then the pages of reading, a minute of meditation, and a line in his journal. Each act alone seemed negligible, almost meaningless, yet together, they had begun to build momentum, a force invisible to the eye but undeniable to the spirit. It was a slow, deliberate alchemy, tiny actions compounding into extraordinary results. As he walked through the city streets on his morning run, he noticed subtle patterns everywhere, the way small tributaries fed into larger rivers, how tiny seeds scattered by the wind grew into towering trees, how daily interactions shaped communities. Life itself was a testament to the power of accumulation, and he realized his habits were doing the same for him. At work, Michael felt the compound effect in action. Projects that once seemed overwhelming were now approachable, broken down into consistent, manageable steps. His energy, focus, and confidence had all been quietly building, leading him to perform at a level far beyond where he had started. Even his colleagues noticed the different tasks were handled efficiently. Meetings flowed with clarity, and his reliability became a silent inspiration. That evening, Michael reflected in his journal, small, consistent actions create momentum. Momentum compounds, and in time, it becomes unstoppable. He recognized that the invisible work of repeated habits was far more powerful than any single act of effort. Just as interest grows exponentially in a bank account, his small, disciplined actions were accruing value in every area of his life: health, relationships, career, and personal growth. Walking through the park, he watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting golden streaks across the lake. The reflections rippled outward, each wave echoing the principle he had internalized. One small action, repeated daily, sends invisible waves that transform the broader picture of life. Michael's habits, compounded over weeks and months, were forming a foundation that could not be easily shaken by setbacks or distractions. He thought back to the first push-up he had completed weeks ago, so small, so seemingly insignificant, and now the accumulation of these tiny victories had created a visible, palpable transformation. He smiled, recognizing the quiet power of the compound effect. It was not flashy, not instantaneous, but unstoppable and profound. As he closed his journal, Michael felt a deep sense of awe and gratitude. He knew that every habit, every action, no matter how small, was a deliberate investment in his future, and he understood that the compound effect of small, consistent habits was the ultimate force behind extraordinary achievement, a force that had begun to transform him day by day, step by step, moment by moment. Rain tapped gently against Michael's apartment window, a soft, rhythmic reminder that life rarely followed a perfect script. Today had been challenging. Emails delayed, a project hit a snag, and a critical meeting didn't go as planned. Frustration bubbled up, threatening to undo the quiet momentum he had been building with his small habits. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he stared at his reflection in the window pane, the city lights shimmering behind him. In the past, setbacks like these would have consumed him entirely, leaving him paralyzed and questioning his worth. But now, something within him had shifted. He remembered the countless mornings he had risen despite fatigue, the nights he had journaled despite distraction, the small rituals repeated day after day. These habits had forged resilience, creating a mental scaffolding that could endure temporary failures without collapsing. Michael took a deep breath, grounding himself. He visualized setbacks not as obstacles, but as mirrors reflecting areas of growth. Each failure was a lesson, a chance to adapt, and an opportunity to reinforce his commitment. He repeated his daily ritual: 10 push-ups, the pages of reading, 1 minute of meditation, and a line in his journal. The actions were simple, almost mundane, but in their repetition, they became acts of defiance against despair and inertia. Later, during his evening run, the city streets glistened from the earlier rain, reflecting neon signs and street lamps in fractured patterns. Michael ran steadily, letting each stride release the tension that setbacks had created. He realized that challenges were inevitable, but habits were the anchor that prevented them from overwhelming him. Each step, each breath, each repetition reinforced the truth that progress wasn't about never failing. It was about continuing despite failure. At work the next day, Michael approached tasks with renewed clarity. He broke down complex problems into small, manageable steps, applying the same principles he had used to build his habits. Colleagues noticed his composure and steady focus, unaware of the internal battles he had faced. Yet, he knew that every small habit, repeated consistently, had prepared him for moments like this, moments where setbacks could either derail or strengthen him. That night, Michael wrote in his journal, "Setbacks are not the end of the journey. They are tests that reveal the strength built by my small, consistent actions. I will continue." The words anchored him, a reminder that resilience is cultivated quietly, habit by habit, day by day. As he looked out over the city skyline, the rain had ceased, leaving the streets shimmering under the streetlights. Michael smiled, understanding that small habits not only build progress, but also fortify the mind to handle life's inevitable setbacks. Each moment of discipline, each repeated action, had created a foundation strong enough to weather the storms. In that quiet reflection, he felt a surge of calm power. Setbacks were no longer threats, they were stepping stones, tests that confirmed the value of his daily choices, and in that realization, he knew he was unstoppable because small habits, repeated consistently, could overcome any obstacle. The late afternoon sun streamed through Michael's apartment window, casting warm golden light across his journals and the neatly stacked books he had been reading. Today felt different. A sense of quiet accomplishment settled over him. The small habits he had nurtured consistently were no longer invisible. Their effects were tangible, perceptible, and undeniably transformative. He opened his journal, scanning the recent entries. Push-ups completed even on tough mornings, pages read when he had felt tired, meditation moments that had quieted his anxious mind, and simple journal lines that captured his reflections and growth. Each small action had been a victory, and together, they formed a mosaic of progress. Michael realized that celebrating these minor wins wasn't just indulgence, it was reinforcement, a recognition that effort compounded into achievement. During his evening run, he felt lighter, more energized, as if the rhythm of his steps resonated with the quiet victories he had accumulated. The city seemed to celebrate him in subtle ways: the gentle breeze, the laughter of children in the park, the golden hue of streetlights illuminating his path. Each moment reflected the unseen power of his habits, rippling outward in ways both visible and imperceptible. He paused midway through the run, catching his breath, and smiled. It wasn't about grand recognition or applause. It was about acknowledging the steady progress, the victories that could easily have been overlooked. Every push-up, every line of journaling, every minute of focus was a small but mighty triumph, and recognizing them gave him fuel, reinforcing the commitment that had started weeks ago in quiet determination. Back home, Michael decided to create a small ritual of celebration. After completing his evening habits, he would mark them with a star in his journal. Each star was a symbol, a visual reminder that small, consistent actions mattered, that persistence had power, and that growth was unfolding quietly yet steadily. He reflected on past failures, remembering times when he had discounted small wins in favor of chasing monumental achievements. Now, he understood that small wins were the heartbeat of lasting success. They were the building blocks of confidence, the silent acknowledgement of progress, and the spark that kept momentum alive. As the city lights flickered outside, Michael wrote in his journal, "Every small victory is a signal that I am on the right path. Celebrate them, no matter how minor they seem. They build the bridge to extraordinary results." He leaned back, feeling a wave of satisfaction and motivation. The journey was ongoing, but acknowledging and celebrating small wins had transformed it from a struggle into a rewarding adventure. Michael smiled as he watched the night settle over the city. Each habit, each act of discipline, each small win had become a part of his identity, shaping him into someone who believed in the compounding power of consistent effort. And in that recognition, he found joy, motivation, and the undeniable truth. Small habits, when celebrated and reinforced, become the foundation of extraordinary life. The first light of dawn filtered through Michael's blinds, revealing the city quietly waking from the night. He sat on the edge of his bed, coffee in hand, reflecting on the weeks of progress he had made. Small habits, repeated consistently, had reshaped his life in subtle but undeniable ways. Yet, a quiet caution stirred within him. Success, no matter how small, could easily breed complacency. Michael knew the danger well. It wasn't failure or external obstacles that often stop people. It was the false comfort of thinking, "I've done enough." He understood that consistency required vigilance. Progress could plateau if he allowed routine to become mechanical, if he stopped challenging himself, if he allowed the comfort of the familiar to replace the discipline that had brought him this far. He began his morning rituals with renewed focus. 10 push-ups, the pages of reading, 1 minute of meditation, and a line in his journal. Each action was performed with deliberate attention, not as a checklist, but as a commitment to his growth. He reminded himself, habits were not just about Performing tasks, they were about cultivating a mindset that refused to settle. During his morning run, Michael observed others jogging, some moving with effort, others with ease. He realized that the difference between lasting change and temporary progress lay in intent. The moment one relaxes vigilance, momentum falters. The city itself moved relentlessly forward. Life did not pause to accommodate comfort or complacency. Michael vowed that his growth would mirror this relentless forward motion. At work, he approached tasks with an acute awareness of the potential for stagnation. Small wins, he knew, could deceive the mind into believing the journey was complete. Instead, he sought new challenges, refined his methods, and pushed slightly beyond his comfort zone every day. Each incremental improvement, each conscious effort, ensured that his habits remained effective, alive, and purposeful. That evening, Michael sat by the window, city lights twinkling below. He journaled. Complacency is the enemy of progress. Even small habits require continuous attention, intention, and refinement. The words resonated deeply. He realized that true mastery was not about performing habits, it was about evolving with them, adapting them, and resisting the temptation of ease. Michael understood that the journey of small habits was not linear or static. Each day required awareness, courage, and a refusal to settle. As he closed his journal and prepared for sleep, he felt a surge of determination. Complacency would not find a home in his life. His habits, grounded in intention and vigilance, would continue to propel him forward, turning small actions into extraordinary transformation. And in that quiet reflection, Michael embraced a vital truth. Consistent habits demand continuous effort and awareness. Avoiding complacency ensures the momentum of progress never wanes. Morning light spilled across Michael's apartment, highlighting the carefully organized desk, neatly stacked books, and the small plant by the window that had grown steadily alongside his habits. Today, he realized that his environment wasn't just a backdrop, it was a powerful tool shaping his behavior, nudging him toward consistency and growth. Michael began by tidying his workspace. Clutter, he knew, distracted the mind, slowing momentum and draining energy. Each item placed intentionally, each corner organized, became a visual reminder of his commitment to his habits. The environment itself was now an ally, silently encouraging action and discouraging delay. During his morning run, he noticed the influence of surroundings on his pace and focus. Joggers passed him with effortless rhythm, and the smooth paths of the park made it easier to maintain momentum. He understood that the world, like his internal habits, responded to structure and design. By arranging his surroundings thoughtfully at work, at home, in daily routines, he could make the execution of habits almost effortless. At work, Michael applied the same principle. He grouped similar tasks, cleared distractions, and created visual cues for priority actions. The result was striking. Productivity increased, stress decreased, and the small habits he relied on became easier to perform. Even colleagues noticed subtle improvements in efficiency and focus, unaware that a carefully structured environment had quietly amplified his efforts. Back at home, he reflected on the mental clarity and motivation the environment provided. Simple changes, placing his journal on the desk, leaving meditation cushions visible, keeping healthy snacks accessible, reinforced his habits automatically. The environment was no longer neutral. It had become a partner in his growth, a silent co-pilot guiding him toward consistent action. That evening, Michael sat by the window, journaling. Designing my environment is designing my habits. When the space around me supports my intentions, consistency becomes effortless and progress unstoppable. The words felt alive, a recognition of the subtle power that surrounded him daily. He understood now that the right environment didn't just make success easier. It made failure less likely. It acted as a compass, guiding attention and energy toward meaningful actions. Each habit he nurtured was reinforced by cues, reminders, and structures that turned intention into automatic behavior. As the city lights glimmered outside, Michael smiled, feeling gratitude for the small, intentional changes that amplified his efforts. His habits were no longer isolated actions, they were part of a network, strengthened by a supportive environment, ready to compound into lasting transformation. In that quiet reflection, he embraced the truth: leveraging your environment magnifies small habits, turning intention into effortless, powerful action, and accelerating the path to extraordinary results. The early morning sun bathed Michael's apartment in a soft, golden glow, illuminating the journals, sneakers, and meditation cushion that had become silent witnesses to his transformation. He realized that habits were no longer just actions. He performed; they were part of who he was becoming. His identity was shifting, shaped by the repeated choices he made day after day, sitting cross-legged in meditation. Michael reflected on the difference between outcome-based habits and identity-based habits. In the past, he had focused on results: lose weight, finish tasks, read more. Now, he understood the power of seeing himself as the kind of person who naturally performed these actions. I am disciplined. I am consistent. I am resilient. These statements weren't aspiration; they were truths he was constructing through repeated behavior. During his morning run, every stride reinforced this new identity. He wasn't running to burn calories or check a box. He was running because he was a runner. He wasn't journaling because he had to track habits. He was journaling because he was the type of person who reflected, learned, and grew. Each habit was no longer external; it was woven into the fabric of who he had become. At work, this shift in identity transformed how he approached challenges. Difficult projects no longer felt intimidating; they were opportunities to express the capabilities of the person he now saw himself as. His confidence, focus, and resilience were no longer dependent on motivation; they were natural extensions of his identity, honed through repeated, consistent action. That evening, Michael reflected in his journal, "When habits shape my identity, I don't need to force myself to act. My actions align naturally with the person I am becoming." The realization was profound. He had moved beyond temporary motivation or external accountability. His habits were no longer tasks; they were expressions of his evolving self. He thought back to the small push-ups, journal entries, and minutes of meditation that had once felt insignificant. Each act had silently reinforced his identity, transforming him from someone who wanted change into someone who embodied change. This subtle but powerful shift meant that every future habit, no matter how small, would now align naturally with the person he had become. As night fell, Michael looked out at the city skyline, feeling a deep sense of empowerment. His habits had sculpted his identity, and in doing so, they had created a version of himself capable of consistency, resilience, and extraordinary growth. In that quiet reflection, he embraced the truth: identity-based habits are the ultimate form of transformation. When small actions shape who you are, extraordinary results become inevitable. The soft glow of dawn painted the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. As Michael stood by his window, taking in the quiet hum of a waking world, the journey he had embarked upon, one of small habits, consistent effort, and deliberate growth, was far from over. In fact, he realized that this was only the beginning. Every push-up, every journal entry, every meditation session had accumulated into something far greater than he had imagined. He was no longer the person who had once doubted the power of small actions. He had become someone who embodied change, resilience, and disciplined purpose. Yet, he understood that mastery was not a destination; it was a lifelong journey, a continual process of growth. Walking through the city streets, he observed the subtle effects of his transformation. His interactions carried patience and empathy. His focus at work inspired colleagues. His energy and presence influenced those around him in ways he hadn't consciously intended. Each habit, repeated over time, had created ripples extending far beyond his personal life. That evening, sitting at his desk with his journal open, Michael reflected on the lessons learned. Small habits, compounded consistently, had built momentum. Setbacks had taught resilience. Patience had nurtured growth. Measurement had revealed progress. Celebrating wins had reinforced motivation. Avoiding complacency had maintained momentum. Leveraging his environment had amplified results. Identity-based habits had transformed him from the inside out. He wrote in his journal, "The journey continues, not because I've achieved everything, but because the process itself is life-changing. Each small habit, each intentional choice, propels me forward." Michael smiled, realizing that the power of small, consistent habits wasn't just in achieving goals; it was in becoming the kind of person who naturally achieved them. The journey was continuous, a living, breathing process, and each day offered an opportunity to refine, strengthen, and expand the life he was creating. As the night settled over the city, he felt a profound sense of purpose and freedom. The future remained unwritten, yet he held the pen firmly. Guided by the invisible hand of his habits, the path ahead would have challenges, distractions, and moments of doubt, but he knew, with quiet certainty, that the disciplined accumulation of small actions would continue to shape him day by day, step by step. In that moment, Michael embraced the ultimate truth. The journey of small, consistent habits never ends, and each day is an opportunity to grow, impact, and transform into the extraordinary version of yourself. With a deep breath, he closed his journal and gazed out at the city, ready to continue not just living, but thriving, guided by the invisible yet unstoppable power of small habits, repeated faithfully over a lifetime. The night was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in Michael's tiny apartment. He sat on the worn-out couch, staring blankly at the muted television. His eyes, heavy with exhaustion, drifted from the flickering screen to the stack of unopened mail on the coffee table. Bills, late notices, credit card statements. Each envelope felt like a reminder that life was moving forward. But he was stuck, stalled at the same point, unable to break free. Michael was 28, yet it felt like his life had been on pause for years. Every January, he made resolutions. Every December, he looked back and realized he had broken them all. He wanted to get in shape, learn new skills, maybe even start his own business one day. But the ambition always came crashing down under the weight of procrastination, doubt, and the desire for instant results. He lived in a constant cycle, set a big goal, push hard for a few days, burn out, give up, then drown in guilt. As he leaned his head back against the couch, he whispered to himself, "What's the point? Maybe I'm just not meant for more." The city outside buzzed with life, cars honking, people laughing in the distance, but inside, his world was quiet, suffocatingly quiet. His reflection in the darkened TV screen stared back at him, tired, unshaven, and unsure. He hated that reflection, not because of how he looked, but because of what it represented. Wasted time, wasted potential. His phone buzzed. A notification from a friend popped up. Another picture at the gym, sweaty and smiling, with a caption about crushing goals. Michael swiped it away, his chest tightening. Why does it feel like everyone else is moving forward while I'm standing still? He got up, pacing the small apartment, the wooden floor creaking under his steps. His heart pounded, not from activity, but from the frustration building inside him. He wanted change desperately, but every time he tried, he aimed for the impossible. He wanted to lose 20 pounds in a month. He wanted to master a new skill in weeks. He wanted to erase years of bad habits overnight. And every time he failed, he sank deeper into hopelessness. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Michael collapsed onto his bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Instead, his mind replayed every moment of failure like a cruel highlight reel. He clenched his fists. Something had to change. But how? The truth he hadn't realized yet was that his greatest enemy wasn't laziness or lack of opportunity. It was his obsession with big change. He didn't know yet that real transformation doesn't come from giant leaps. It comes from tiny, almost invisible steps, repeated day after day. As he finally drifted into restless sleep, the storm of frustration still brewing inside him. He had no idea that the first spark of change, the lesson of the 1%, was waiting just around the corner, ready to break the chains that held him down. The morning sun slipped through the thin curtains, painting faint golden lines across Michael's floor. He sat at the small dining table, a half-eaten piece of toast in front of him, scrolling absent-mindedly on his phone. His thumb stopped when a video appeared, an old interview with a coach. The man on screen said just one line that hit Michael harder than he expected. "You don't have to be twice as good tomorrow. You just have to be 1% better." Michael frowned, replaying the words. 1%? That sounded ridiculous. How could 1% matter? He had always been chasing big weight loss, big career moves, big wins. Small never felt enough. But something in that sentence lodged itself in his mind. He grabbed a notebook from the counter, flipping through blank pages until he found one with shaky handwriting. He scribbled, "What's 1% today?" At first, he laughed bitterly. 1% improvement couldn't possibly solve his problems. But then, almost reluctantly, he wrote a few ideas. Do one push-up, read one page, drink one glass of water instead of soda. Tiny things, almost embarrassingly small. But for the first time in months, the thought didn't overwhelm him. It didn't feel impossible. That afternoon, he dropped to the floor and did a single push-up. His arms trembled, and he collapsed almost immediately. He laughed at himself, half in frustration, half in disbelief, but he had done it one, not 10, not 20, just one. Later, he opened a book that had been collecting dust on his shelf. He didn't set a goal to finish it. He just read one page. The words didn't change his life in that moment, but he noticed something. He had started. For the first time, he hadn't quit before he began. As the days trickled by, Michael kept repeating the process. One push-up turned into 2, one page into 3. He didn't force it, didn't pressure himself with impossible deadlines. Instead, he asked the same question every morning. What's 1% today? It was subtle, so subtle, in fact, that no one else noticed at first. His friends didn't see a difference. His co-workers still saw the same quiet, tired man at his desk. But inside, Michael began to sense a shift, a tiny one, but real. He wasn't chasing perfection anymore. He was chasing progress. One night, as he closed his notebook, a faint smile tugged at his lips. The weight of failure that had haunted him for years didn't feel as heavy. He realized something powerful. The mountain he had been staring at all this time didn't need to be climbed at a single leap. He only had to take one small step, then another and another. For the first time, Michael felt hope not as a distant dream, but as a daily practice. And in that quiet apartment, with nothing more than a notebook and a single push-up, he had unknowingly begun rewriting his story. The city buzzed outside Michael's window, but inside his apartment, the world was quiet, just the sound of his pen scratching across paper. He had written the words again. What's 1% today? It was strange how this tiny question had started to echo in his head. It had been only 2 weeks since he first tried it, and yet already, the world felt a little different. That morning, instead of snoozing his alarm 3 times, he forced himself up at the first ring. It wasn't heroic. He wasn't running marathons or meditating for an hour. He just stood up, stretched, and whispered to himself, 1%. By the time he reached the office, he noticed something peculiar. He wasn't as tired. He didn't drag himself to his desk the way he usually did. He even greeted the receptionist with a smile, something he hadn't done in months. His coworker, Sarah, glanced at him when he poured black coffee instead of his usual sugar-loaded latte. New diet, she teased. Michael shrugged, just trying something different. She laughed, but he didn't explain. It wasn't about diets or drastic changes. It was about something she couldn't see, something so small it barely existed. Yet Michael felt it, like a pebble dropped into still water, sending ripples far beyond its size. That evening, he walked past the elevator in his building and chose the stairs. He was out of breath by the 3rd floor, sweating, heart pounding. But when he reached his apartment, he grinned through the exhaustion. It was such a small act, 1 flight of stairs, instead of an elevator, yet it felt like rebellion against his old self. One act led to another. He washed the dishes right after eating instead of leaving them overnight. He made his bed in the morning instead of ignoring it. He wrote a single encouraging line in his notebook, keep going. The 1% rule wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. No one cheered for him, no applause, no trophies. But the ripples were growing. Weeks later, Sarah noticed again. You've been different, she said, tilting her head, like, calmer, louder. What's going on with you? Michael paused. For a moment, he considered brushing it off. But then, he smiled softly. Just small steps. That's all. She didn't get it. Not yet. But Michael did, and that was enough. That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling with a strange new feeling in his chest. Not pride, not victory, something deeper, like the quiet certainty of a seed breaking through soil, unseen by the world, but destined to grow. He realized something life-changing. 1% isn't small when it compounds. 1% is everything. The ripples had begun. Michael sat at his desk, staring at the glow of his computer screen. The office clock ticked past 7 p.m., long after most of his colleagues had gone home. He used to lose himself in endless scrolling, switching between tabs, convincing himself that just 5 more minutes on social media would help him relax. But tonight, something shifted. His phone buzzed on the desk. Notifications piled up, group chats. A new episode from his favorite show, ads urging him to order food instead of cooking. The old Michael would have grabbed it without hesitation, sinking into the familiar cycle. But he stopped. His hand hovered, then retreated. 1%. Instead of opening Instagram, he closed the laptop and stood. His apartment was just a few blocks away, but he didn't take the usual quick route. Instead, he wandered down streets he rarely walked, noticing details he'd ignored for years: the neon sign flickering above the corner store, the mural painted on the wall of a closed diner, the laughter of kids chasing a ball in the street. For once, he wasn't a prisoner of autopilot. He was awake later that night. His best friend Daniel called. "Man, we haven't gamed in weeks. You go see me, or what?" Michael hesitated. The guilt was real. Their late-night gaming marathons had been their thing for years, their way to escape reality. But they often stretched until 3 a.m., leaving him drained and foggy for work. He cleared his throat. Not ghosting, just trying to change some stuff, you know. Daniel chuckled. "Change? Like what?" Michael swallowed. "Should I tell him?" Will he laugh? I'm working on little habits. Nothing big, just trying to be better than yesterday." Silence. Then Daniel scoffed. "Bro, one night of sleep isn't going to turn you into a superhero." Michael smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but 100 nights might." The word surprised even him. But they felt true, solid. That weekend, temptation returned. He woke up on Saturday with the old craving to binge-watch shows and order greasy food. He sat on the couch, remote in hand, the delivery app already open on his phone. Then he paused. He walked to the kitchen, boiled water, and made tea instead of 10 hours of television. He told himself, just watch one episode. Instead of ordering junk, he scrambled eggs and cut up an apple. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy, but it was different. It was resistance. By evening, Michael felt a strange kind of power, not because he'd been perfect, but because he had broken one pattern, and then another, and another. As he journaled that night, he wrote one sentence in bold letters: "Every old pattern I break makes room for a new life." The words stared back at him like a promise. For the first time in years, Michael believed he wasn't trapped by who he had been. He was becoming someone new, one broken pattern at a time. The first snowfall of winter dusted the city in white. Michael pulled his jacket tighter as he walked toward the library, his breath fogging in the cold air. A few months ago, the idea of spending a Saturday in a library would have sounded boring, almost laughable. But today, it felt right. Inside, the smell of old books greeted him, warm and familiar. He wandered between shelves until he found a book on personal growth he'd bookmarked weeks earlier. He sat near a window, the glass frosted from the cold outside, and began to read. Half an hour passed, then an hour, and suddenly he realized he wasn't restless. He wasn't itching to check his phone. He was absorbed. The small discipline of reading just 10 pages a day had stretched into full immersion. Later, as he walked home, Michael's mind replayed a thought from the book. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. That phrase hit him harder than he expected. He imagined compound interest in money. $1 saved each day might not seem like much, but over months and years, it grew into something powerful. Could the same be true of effort? Could the tiny actions he'd been making, day by day, truly build into a future he couldn't yet imagine? That night, Michael stood in front of his bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand. He studied himself, the faint dark circles under his eyes fading, his posture straighter, his jawline sharper than before. The changes were small, almost invisible, but they were there. 1%. Every day, he thought back to the mornings he dragged himself out of bed to do push-ups, the nights he resisted staying up till late, the afternoons he swapped a soda for water. None of them felt like a revolution, but together they were, turning him into a different person. Weeks later, during a staff meeting at work, his manager asked him to share an update on a project. Normally, Michael's voice would waver, his palms sweaty, his eyes glued to the floor, but this time, he spoke clearly, his ideas outlined, his tone calm but firm. When the meeting ended, a colleague leaned over and whispered, "You're on fire today, man." Been practicing? Michael just smiled. Something like that. It wasn't practice, not in the traditional sense. It was the compound effect. Every book read, every night of rest, every step taken instead of sitting it had added up to this moment. That evening, as snow fell steadily outside his window, Michael journaled again. His handwriting was steady, deliberate. Small efforts are not small. They multiply in silence until the world sees the difference. And for the first time, he wasn't just writing it to believe it. He was living it. The bathroom light flickered softly, casting a golden glow on the mirror. Michael stood there, water dripping from his freshly washed face, his palms resting on the sink's cool porcelain. For months, this ritual had been the same: wake up, wash, and glance half-heartedly at his reflection before rushing out the door. But tonight, something was different. He paused. He looked out at first. He searched for the flaws. That was the old habit: dark circles, tired eyes, a hint of frustration etched into his forehead. But slowly, almost reluctantly, he noticed something else. His skin looked clearer. His shoulders no longer hunched forward as much. His eyes carried a steadier, calmer look. Is this really me? He whispered under his breath, half in disbelief. The mirror didn't lie. The changes weren't dramatic, no sudden transformation, no movie-like glow-up, but they were there, subtle, earned. It reminded him of a tree he'd once seen as a child. Every spring, he watched it from his window, waiting for it to bloom. At first, there was nothing but bare branches. Then one day, without warning, tiny green buds would appear. Weeks later, the tree would stand in full blossom, alive and radiant. Yet he realized those buds had been forming invisibly all along. His progress was the same, invisible at first, now undeniable. Michael leaned closer to the mirror, staring into his own eyes. 1%, he muttered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. 1% every day. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind buzzing. If such tiny habits had already shifted his reflection, what else could they change? His career, his relationships, his confidence. The thought both terrified and thrilled him, because if improvement compounded, then so did neglect. Every skipped workout, every night wasted, every careless decision, it all added up to. The mirror wasn't just showing him progress, it was showing him responsibility. Weeks later, Michael found himself in a department store. He wasn't there for anything special, just browsing, when he caught his reflection in a long hallway mirror. A stranger would have seen just another young man, but Michael saw posture, clarity, and quiet confidence. He straightened his jacket and walked with purpose. For once, the reflection didn't feel like a stranger at home. He recorded his thoughts in his journal. The mirror doesn't reveal overnight success. It reveals quiet victories stacked on top of each other. I see proof now. I am proof now. And for the first time in years, he didn't just close the notebook. He believed every word he wrote. The sun was setting as Michael walked home from work, his shoes crunching softly against the pavement. The day had been ordinary: mails, phone calls, small office chatter, but something unusual tugged at him as he passed a familiar coffee shop. Months ago, this was where his afternoons always ended, with a large caramel latte, extra syrup, and sometimes a slice of cake on the side. He could almost taste the sugar on his tongue as he looked inside, but instead of walking in, Michael kept moving. No inner battle, no dramatic struggle, just a decision. His feet carried him past the door with ease, and he realized he hadn't stepped inside for weeks. It hit him suddenly, so hard he stopped mid-step. This was a win, a small one, maybe, but a win nonetheless. And as he kept walking, he started noticing all the other invisible victories stacked behind him. Waking up without hitting snooze, drinking water instead of soda, reading 5 pages of a book before bed instead of scrolling endlessly on his phone, each one small, each one almost forgettable, but together they were rewriting his life. When he arrived home, he tossed his bag on the chair and sat down at his desk. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to chase some grand, overwhelming transformation. Instead, he opened his journal and wrote 3 words in big, bold letters: small wins matter. As he wrote, his mind replayed little snapshots from recent weeks: the extra push-up when his arms were shaking, the choice to walk instead of drive, the way he now reached for fruit instead of chips without even thinking. These weren't huge achievements anyone would clap for. No one was applauding, but together, they built something stronger than applause. Momentum. And momentum, he realized, was a dangerous kind of power. Once it carried you, it was harder to stop than to keep going. Later that night, he video called his sister. She noticed it before he could say a word. "You look different," she said, tilting her head with a smile. Michael laughed, scratching his chin awkwardly. "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, more alive." He froze for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't just about him anymore. The changes he made were beginning to ripple outward, visible to the people he loved. His 1% improvements weren't only shifting his habits, they were shifting his presence in the world. As the call ended, Michael sat in the quiet glow of his lamp, a thought pulsing in his mind like a heartbeat. Every small win plants a seed, and seeds, given time, become forests. That night, he closed his eyes not with anxiety about what tomorrow might demand, but with anticipation of the small victories waiting to be claimed. Because now, he knew the truth: small wins don't stay small. They grow. In today's story, we learn how even the smallest actions can create the ripple effect. Let's pause for a moment and explore some powerful English phrases that were naturally connected to this journey. Standing still. This means not moving forward in life, feeling stuck. Example, if you don't take action, you'll keep standing still. A tiny shift, a very small change that can create a big difference. Example, waking up 10 minutes earlier is a tiny shift that changes your entire morning. Breaking patterns. This means escaping old habits or cycles. Example, he finally broke the pattern of procrastination. The compound effect, a powerful idea. Small steps, when repeated, grow into big results. Example, reading just one page daily creates the compound effect over a year. Small wins, achievements that seem small but build confidence. Example, drinking more water every morning is a small win for health. Notice how these expressions not only teach English, but also carry life-changing wisdom. Now let's highlight the lessons from this story, things you can apply today. Small actions create big impact. 1% progress every day beats standing still. Consistency beats intensity. It's not about doing it all at once, it's about showing up daily. Your environment matters. Surround yourself with people and places that support your growth. Celebrate small wins. They fuel your motivation and remind you that you're on the right path. Be patient with yourself. True change takes time, but every step forward counts. So here's the truth. Transformation doesn't come from giant leaps, it comes from the smallest, invisible steps we take when no one is watching. The person you dream of becoming is already within you, waiting for those tiny shifts to set them free. Every push-up, every page, every mindful choice, it all compounds into the story of who you are becoming. So start today. Start small, and remember, greatness is not built in a moment, it is built in moments.